everyone, in this tutorial we are building a full stack blog application. This application will let users to create and publish blog posts, browse posts by category, and also let users stay up to date through a newsletter subscription. We'll also implement user authentication using NextAuth. The app will also have a clean and minimalistic design inspired by Neobrutalism trend in web style. Since this is a full stack application, we will also learn how to set up and interact with a database. Additionally, we will cover hosting the database and deploy our website, also setting up a file storage to save our blog images. Throughout the process, we will explore Next.js 13 new concepts such as server actions and client and server components. We will also revisit and implement older concepts and how they have changed in the new version, like routing and APIs. We will use Tailwind CSS for styling and also customize the existing Tailwind classes to create a unique look and add new custom classes created by us. So this video contains a lot of learnings ahead, and excited to share this tutorial and looking forward to seeing your blogs. And before we start to jump into the code, I'll go over the architecture because it is important that you understand these concepts and use these concepts later on. You are able to apply them to your projects while also building this one out. Okay, when a user interacts with the website, it usually happens on the client side. For example, a blog information gets shown, images of the blog, and then user fills out a form to create a new blog post. All this state while user is filling out, whether or not user is logged in, etc. That is handled on the client side. Now let's say client wants to submit a new blog, or client wants to get more information about the blog. User pressed read more, right? It sends a data request to server, and server for client we're using Next.js, but also for the server it would be within the Next.js application. If you have building React application before, you might have used that React applications are client applications, and you probably used another API to interact with the server. In this case, it's done in here. And we'll have a Prisma. We'll set up Prisma, which is an ORM. Basically what it does is that it helps us define the schema of the database. So like if you written SQL before, like how to structure your tables. In schema, we structure modules. We determine we want to save a module for blog posts, right? What kind of fields it should have, and what kind of fields should user have, and etc. Finally, database stores the contents of this every single module blog post item, every single other module items, and this database will be hosted on the railway. And let's go back to the example where client makes a request to the server, and Prisma, in addition to creating modules using it also comes with a function to interact with the database and run queries to it. For example, we want to get all blog posts, we're going to run find many, and this database will find the data, return it, and then this Prisma function would have a return statement, and then with this data response throughout this server, we return it back to the client, and then client displays it back to the user. So that's like pretty much higher level review of what we're going to build. We're going to also use, in addition to this three, so it will be Next.js application with Prisma, and then the type of the database we're using is PostgreSQL. For authentication, we'll use NextAuth, so it will help us to manage like login, logout, etc., but the user information would still live in the database. And yeah, we'll store it over there, and also we'll use upload thing for the file storage, but file URLs will still save it on the database, and then we'll go more into details of these services as we set them up. And now, let's jump into coding. As usual, we'll create the project using npx create next app command. If you don't have it installed, go ahead and install it. Then we'll give in the project name, which in this case I'm using blog app, and for this one we're using TypeScript, yes for yes lint, also same for Tailwind. We're going to opt in for no for source directory, and next question app router, which is new feature, we're going to use that, and no for import aliases. So now that the node modules are installed and the app is set up, we open it up in VS Code or your choice of IDE, and let's go into the app folder, page.tsx, which is where all this like generator code is, and layout, where it wraps all the pages inside this app folder with some basic HTML in this case, and we have a body class. So now let's go and run the application from the terminal. Inside blog app, we put npm run dev. That should start up the application and server on localhost 3000. Now you can copy this and open in the browser of your choice. I'm gonna open directly inside VS Code just to save like space. So show browser and paste in the URL. So here we have our application and all the code that we opened from page.tsx. This is coming, this text and other styles are coming from here. So now we can close out. We have 3 divs here, which I'm going to remove. I'm just going to leave the main class name at the top. And let's start with creating some layout elements. So in app, we create a new folder. I'm going to name this layout. And inside layout, I'm going to get started with header.tsx. So first we create like a basic component that just contains text header. And the props are type, it's empty. I will take this header and go back to the layout and put it in here so that any page that we create, it's going to have a header at the top. So first thing we need to do is import header on the layout file. And we can go in and put this, like copy it, and inside the body, we can wrap these children inside the main class. So all the page would have main class. So once they're in here, at the top of this div, we're gonna add header. And if we paste that in and save it, we're gonna see this text show and the component showing up at the top. Now let's go back to the header and add some changes like logo and then buttons on the right side. So first let's wrap it and add a class name. I'm gonna add some paddings on the side as well as on the top, and add a border at the bottom. So these classes are Tailwind classes and all the styles are defined in a Tailwind. So throughout that we're gonna style it using mostly class names. And then inside here we're gonna wrap this into another div that would be for logo. So text XL for the font size, logo we put that as a text, and then the button we'll name this sign in, and we'll do the button functionality later on. We can just do styling now. Justify between and flex so that they're spread out. Logo is on the left side and sign in remains on the right side. Let's do text white and background black. So here's our button, and let's actually remove this padding from the top and just add it to the logo so we can have more space for the button itself and have that stretch all the way towards the end. And I'm gonna also update the padding of this one so it looks similar on the both sides. Seems like border is not showing up. We're missing border class itself. So let's do border and color black. Now here it is. And actually I'm gonna be using this border, this color a lot. So what I'm gonna do so that every time I don't have to define it as black is I'm gonna go to Tailwind config, where this file is automatically generated. I haven't added any of this code when we said yes to the Tailwind, but inside the config here I can in the theme extend change if there's any classes that's already predefined by Tailwind and customize it. And actually it would be after the extend we create another field, so we're changing border color, and inside border color we take the default and set it to the color that we want. So it's suggesting me this hash. Oh, it did change color. It's very subtle and it's more on the white side. So I'm gonna actually take this hash and change it to just black instead. Let's save this, and now we do see border color get updated. Inside the public folder, I added this image of an illustration. I'm gonna also link the illustration in the description where the website that I got it from. And if we go to the app, let's use that illustration in the hero section. I'm going to create a new folder for home. This would be all the components for specifically for the home page, and inside create a new component for hero section.tsx. Let's create a functional TypeScript component, and in here, if we want to display the image in Next.js, we need to import image from NextImage. So let's do that at the top. And what we'll do after is we'll come down here and add the image tag and pass the source to it. So let's first change this turn into a section, since it's a section for a website, and then add an image. So for the image, what we need is source would be directly like the name of the image. It's accessible since it's in the public folder. And then we have width that's also required, and height when we are creating image in Next.js. So I'm gonna set this to 300. I think it's exactly the size of the image that I have, and the height would also be 300. It's good to have alt text describing what the image is. So I'll say person walking, and that should be it. Let's just like display, see how it looks like first, and then move on to continuing with it. So we're gonna go back to our page, import our hero section in there so that it shows up, because right now we're not able to see it. And inside the main here, we deleted the other code. We're gonna replace that with hero section, and that is our image right there. And let's go back to the hero section and make further changes. So in here at the top, I'm gonna add header with h1 describing what the blog is about, and then blog page, and then a button that says browse all the articles that will take user later on to the page where they can see all the articles. And let's save this. It should show up when I hit save, but on our server. But let's try reloading. And I'm gonna refresh that. Okay, so we do see the text here now, and let's make this header larger, but updating its font size. So text, I'm gonna set that to 4XL, and it's if we expand this look good on larger screen, but for a smaller screen, let's make it a little bit smaller. And we do that different styling for different screen sizes using media screen breakpoints. So for starting from larger, by default, we're gonna make it smaller text 2XL, and starting smaller screens text 4XL. That way on larger screen we get the larger font. And let's make changes to the section. We are going to make this a grid, and then we're going to define the columns, a number of columns we want and their direction, right? So by default, let's do grid columns 1. That means that every item inside this grid will take up one full column. And I'm going to also go back to the page and remove this main, because we don't want main to be only on this page. Let's use that also on the layout so other pages have the same styling as a main container. And let me replace that instead with a fragment where we're going to keep adding more components to our main page. And if I go back to the layout, we already have a header here. We already have a class that's called main, but I'm going to replace that, the one we got from the page. and let's close this out. I'm also going to remove most of this styling. So we're going to leave minimum height screen. We're going to remove this flex related class names, and also I think we're good to remove this other two as well and replace it with the, what container does is that it sets maximum width of elements, and then this maximum width changes based on the screen size. Let's fix the tag there and save the changes. We can go back to the hero section, and in here also define grids for the larger screens. We want to have both image and the text, image on the left, the text on the right, and so that would be by grid columns 12. So our grid is going to have 12 total columns, and we can define how much of this 12, that is total width, can each column take. So first, I'm going to wrap this text on the button in one div, and that will take call span 7, which means 7 out of the 12, so it has more space in there. And then the second one, we can do the remaining of space, which is 5, so the image would take that area. So if we see it on the larger screen, that's how it looks like. Let's open the inspector and hover over our grid to understand the allocation. So we have the text that takes in this much, and then this is the whole grid that is also a child of a container. So this is the width that it takes. As you notice on the right side, it has a margin and it's aligned towards to the left, so it takes up the remaining space, and that's the 12 columns that we defined for the grid. So now by default I want this container to be centered, and we can achieve this by adding margin auto. For Tailwind it would be MX auto, but I don't want to do that for every single time I create a container, so it would be better if we do this in Tailwind config. So by default when we create a container, it's centered. And we can do that, so we already updated customized border color. Let's add a container, and in here define center as true. And I'm missing the column here, so let's save that, and let's see on larger screen now it should be centered. And let's also remove the gradients of this gray color. I think it's also coming from either Tailwind config. Oh, they're still there. So there's another globals file where it could be defined. The body, yeah, has linear gradient, as you can see. So let's remove that. And now we can align text on the hero. So going back to the hero section, in here what we can do is we can define place self center. That would make grid item center, also text center, and then on larger screens we can have text on the left side and justify self start, so it would center itself over y-axis. Let's also make it the text larger on big screen, so I'm going to add another breakpoint MD text XL, and changing the line height, I will set it to normal, so lines in between have a little bit bigger space. And let's also maybe change the button. Right now it just text has no styling, so I'm going to add text color white. Background would be set to indigo 500, and let's add some padding on both sides. Let's do 4 and 2 and border 2, so that looks better. We're also gonna make the corners rounded and add a shadow. So shadow, we would add a custom value, so that would be in the brackets we would pass numbers. Let's do 0.25 would be on the right side on the bottom, but then on the top and left we're going to do 0 and 0, and then add like the opacity. Since we're doing this in Neobrutalism style, I guess it has this very thick shadows and light coming from top and left corner. Okay, and then let's make bigger paddings the button so it pops out more. And we can also fix the mobile view. As you can see, it's aligned, the text is aligned on the left side, and that's because we don't have the width that's full. So if we go inside this call span, like the grid item itself, and add width full class name, now it aligns itself. And let's also fix the margin of the image. We can add in here, would be like margin top, maybe set it to 3. And update paddings are too large for smaller screens, so by default we can make this 4 and 6 for larger screens, and define the default as 2 or 4 and 2 on the y-axis. Okay, and one more thing, the margin at the top for the text, or even like the grid container itself, and we'll set this to 6. Okay, that looks better. One thing is that the container is too, the width of it is too large. If we make it on full width, it's even larger, and we can customize the container width by also like going into Tailwind and passing in the Tailwind config file and passing in the values. So this two should be, I guess, like the text and the image closer to each other. And so yeah, I'm gonna go into the Tailwind and inside container define this on each breakpoint what the max width should be. And then I'm gonna paste in values for what I have picked. So on starting smaller screens is gonna be 600, then on medium 700, 900, and etc. And then you can also copy this. I'll add the link to the GitHub or from the screen as well. And now the length is smaller and it looks better, as you can see. Now let's connect our application to the database. For database hosting, our server is going to be deployed on Railway, so that's where like our data is going to live. As for interacting with the data from our Next.js application, we're going to use Prisma. Prisma is an ORM. It has a support for TypeScript, which is great for our use case. As for the authentication, we're going to use this library called NextAuth. It's going to handle our sign in, sign up functions. It will handle the also logic for storing user sessions that is accessible to us, and etc. And it connects to different providers like social logins like Google, Facebook, and etc. Now let's set up Prisma and get started by installing Prisma CLI using this command. We need Prisma CLI to run Prisma commands from the terminal, and I'm going back to my VS Code, opening up terminal, new tab, and I'll paste npm install Prisma save dev. Another another package that we're gonna need is Prisma client. That is for us, our like code to interact with Prisma. So that would be npm install at Prisma client. And while that's loading, let's see what command we need for NextAuth, and it's gonna be just once again npm install NextAuth. So let's paste that in there, have those 3 packages ready in the code, and get started and make changes or even write a schema. We can get connection string from Railway. What they'll do is that string and URL Prisma is going to use to connect to the server that's hosted on Railway. So you can just click start a new project without even creating an account, but keep in mind if you do that, the project would, I think, be only up for like 1 or 2 days. And the type of database we are using is PostgreSQL. So even if you log in, press type a new project, you're going to select provision PostgreSQL, and it will take a few seconds or minutes to create the instance. And once it is ready, we can, yeah, that's the notice that it's temporary. We can click on it and go to connect. Wherever it says available variables database URL, copy that. And we go to our project. We can close the terminal and open. There should be a file that says .env local. Okay, I don't think it's there. Let's see. All right, we can create a new file then, name it .env.local. Name the variable database URL so that it matches the one in here, and then you can paste Prisma, and that would be using the command npx prisma init. And this will create a folder inside our project that's named Prisma, and it also tells us this step that we did where we set the database URL in env file. Actually, let's, instead of env local, because Prisma instruction says env file, let's do it over there. Oh, it created a new env file. Okay. So yeah, just paste your database URL, and don't forget, by default, for some reason, NextJs doesn't make that env file get ignored. So inside get ignored, you need to add that file, because this is your secret key to your database. So if you upload this to GitHub, then other people can make changes to your database as well. So that would be the best practice. And all right, so Prisma is initiated. I'm gonna close this other files out and go inside the folder. We have one file, schema.prisma. So what's happening in this file? First, it's indicated how client should be generated. This is using this client package that we installed. Then we have the type of the provider, PostgreSQL, and then where the URL is coming from. It's coming from environment variable named database URL. So if we wanted to start creating tables, we can take this sample code and paste it after the configuration. And so if we go here, this. So if we save, the code itself would be saved, but nothing happens on the database side because we need to run migration that would create the database tables using this Prisma migrate. So let's copy that and paste it in here. Okay, so it can't reach server localhost. So when it generates the Prisma folder, it also automatically fills your .env file with the value. I haven't, that wasn't happening before, so I just noticed it, and you have to replace this value with your railway copied URL. Command one more time. So it would show that it's reading environment variables, and PostgreSQL database should be railway if it's reading the correct URL now. And if the connection is successful, it should show us like a message, migrate, and it also generated a client, which later on we can use to use it in our app. So, and there's this migrations folder. Now, if we go to the railway PostgreSQL, here we should see, just to make sure that connection was right, tables, 2 tables for post and then user. And here we also can see, if we click on the table, the fields. And we can directly add also data for now inside the railway. So going to the post, and we click on add row. Make sure you do row, not column. ID, I'm gonna do default, title, test post, content, author ID, we'll leave that, insert. Oh, author ID has to be, is required. So let's first create a user, then let's do ID 1. Default email test@gmail, user, insert. Okay, so ID is 2. Then going back to post, content, and author ID 2. Let's insert. Okay, great. And now let's fetch this data from our application. And here we have like an example of how we can fetch it. So let's follow that. And in terms of where we fetch and interact with the database, every component inside app folder that's like new with Next.js 13 is server component. And inside server components, you can interact with the database, right? So inside the app, if for example in home, I create a new file that says posts section, or just let's do posts.tsx and tr. So first we need to import Prisma client and initialize it. And then we can, maybe not the user, just get user with the posts, and it's going to be I'm gonna make this async. And inside here we can console log users, and we can do the same for posts. Let's add this on our page. Oh, it's not an export default, so it needs to be wrapped in brackets. Oh, export. It's interesting why didn't it just... Okay, and let's add that below here. So we won't be able to see anything on the page since we haven't changed the styling, but if we go to wherever our application is running, because console log is coming from a server component, that's why it's gonna show up in terminal rather than a console here. So let's reload the page. We seems to be in, it's missing a closing tag. Also, we have to, and yeah, that's our user. That's another one, and that's the content. Now let's start building out this post component that we can display some of the posts here, map out this, and create a new component also for every single one of the posts in kind of like a card form. First, I'm going to add a header. I'm going to say, let's add h2 instead. And this will say trending. Class name, text, let's set to for Excel, and text center. Also margin top 3. And for the post, let's create a new component. Now we are inside home. We can say post card.tsx ce with the export component. And in this case, we will need props, and we need postcard to take in props about information regarding the post. So then we can later on display it. Usually with the types, we define the type. For example, we can say title, what type title is string, then description, etc. And that should match the ones coming from here. Or we can just use types generated from Prisma, which is definitely easier. And that would be done by importing type and the name of the type. So as a props, we would take in post, and then it would be of type post. And here we can even do destructuring. So, and we can, oh, not types post, that should be from Prisma client. Okay, the error is gone, and we can take a sneak peek what we have. So we have title and content. Let's display them. Post.title. And inside paragraph, post.content. So even the VS Code auto suggestions, it picks up the type post, and if you hover over it, you're gonna see what fields are available, and it gives you suggestions based on the availability. So if you don't exactly remember, you can just use that. And I didn't mean to do yep, content. Let's save this, and we can import this inside here. Import postcard. And after the trending, I'm going to create a new div. Oh, although I do want it to be flex, but let's see. So I'll disregard this styling for now. We take the post, which is an array. It's an array because we have find many. Even though we have saved one element in the database, it will still come back as an array with one element. That's fine. And then we're going to take it, we're going to map it out. The ID is always unique in Prisma. It should be. It's not the case. And it takes in props post. So we're taking every single post and we pass it in here. And it should display it. Let's reload. So yeah, we have test post and then the content. I'm gonna go to the railway and add some more posts so we can better style them. And for this one, I asked ChatGPT to just generate titles and content for 3 of them, and I'm just gonna be editing them. So save. Okay, if we reload the page now, we should be seeing the new ones. And let's start styling them. XL, margin bottom 3. Margin top 4 from the trending. Also, we are going to do let's add a padding 4. border dot to, and no, we don't need this anymore. We're going to replace this with rounded. And let's add the same shadow as we did for the button. So I'm going to copy that. It's this one. And I want each single one of them to be of different color. And that we can achieve from the post itself. So I'm going to clear out the users. We don't need that data anymore. We're just using posts, as well as console log. And let's create a new constant, background classes, and this would be like 3. Let's do, okay. Pink 500, blue, and let's leave yellow. And we should pass these background classes to the postcard. And let's add the index. So using the index, the first item in the array would get this one, second would get this, and then etc. So that would be class name equals to background classes and index. And this is red now because we have not added this type to our postcard. So let's add that. Class name is optional and it would be string, and the color would go in here. So using like string literals, we can turn this so that we can add the variable in addition to the default classes that we have. Inside this structuring, we pass this prop down. Save it. Here it is. Okay, and then the text is overflowing on smaller screens. We want to make this full width, so do grid columns 1. And also inside the postcard, let's do the text first. I'm gonna turn on word wrap so you guys can see everything and doesn't flow over here. And that would be 3 XL. By default, let's do 2 XL. As the next step, let's create pages for the post. So since we want this to be the page dynamic, right? Because we don't know when the post is going to be posted, what kind of data is going to be coming from the database. We have to create a page that identifies the post dynamically. So the best way to do that is using the ID. And inside our app, we're gonna go create a new folder, name it post. I'm gonna rename this and do blog instead. And so this is where we take in the dynamic value, which is ID. So this is going to be a new folder. New folder in brackets for dynamic ID, and then new page, page.tsx. Okay, so we have that. If we navigate now to blog and to, we should see this page here. And the reason once again this header shows up is because it is part of the layout. Okay, so how do we access this ID here, which is supposed to be the post ID from database? That would be using params. So inside page, let's remove props because this is not a component. We don't take in props here. So let's destructure it. And then params, we take in the name of the dynamic value, which is ID, and that would be string. Let's save that and let's display page dot ID to make sure it's coming in. 2. Great. Now let me actually pick ID of a post. Okay, 2 could be 1. And let's search for, let's make a Prisma query. Let's find a post that has ID of 2. So the same way we did using posts, right, where we initiate a Prisma client, we can do the same. But for some reason in local development, when you run multiple, create new Prisma clients, then you get a warning. So let's select folder, let's add the folder in the root of our project. I'm going to name this lib and new file prisma.ts. I'll paste in the configuration. So this configuration, I think I got it from Prisma website itself. But basically what it's doing is that it's checking if it's not production, if it's development, for example, it's going to find this global this and set Prisma or get Prisma from there. Save this. And because I'll be using this a lot in different components, pages, etc., I want this to be available via module. I don't want to count every time how many folders back I have to go to. And that could be configured inside tsconfig. So inside compiler options, we have path. So this is already configured, I guess, in NextJs 13. And if I'm going to go to blog page, I'll do import Prisma. Inside brackets. And from lib.prisma. / okay. Let's make this async. And constant post equals to, this time we are using find unique because we just want one value, and we pass in, when we say find unique, we always need to pass in a where condition. And inside where we need to also give a condition. So I want ID to equal same as params ID here. And because this is coming in a string, that's just like a URLs are in type of string, we need to convert the type. And yeah, I guess that's it. It returns the value inside post. And let's console log the post. Published false. Okay, so the post is coming in. Now let's modify here. If we have post, dot title, and it's here. And that's the content. Now let's link this to the postcards we have on the front page. And for link, we're gonna import link from NextJS. So this would be, and then from here, let's navigate back to home. Let's turn this into a link. href, that is going to be blog. And post.id. So if we click this now, we're going back to the page. Let's also update link of the logo. Same thing here, import link from next link. href, this is just gonna navigate to the index page. So let's go back, click this. What we are going to do next is set up authentication, and we'll be using NextAuth, previously known as NextAuth. Now it's renamed to Auth.js, and with this you can set up different kinds of authentication, whether it's username, email, social sign-ins, and etc. And we'll use GitHub, since we're kind of building a tech blog and most of the developers would have GitLab. It's easier to log in, and so Auth.js would handle authentications in the sense of like user and connecting their GitHub, logging in, logging out, keeping track of the session, which is really convenient. But what we also want to do is connect it to the Prisma, so we keep the user record itself and all the data like logs related to the user. So that's where the Prisma adapter comes in, which we have to set up in addition to setting up Auth.js. And let's look at the installation steps. So we already have a Prisma client. We're going to go ahead and install Auth Prisma adapter next. npm install save. And this is the example of setup where you pass the adapter and then the provider that depending on which kind of login you want to enable. And we would have to modify our schema a little bit, because here, as you can see, we have an account, then we keep track of the session and then the user, and then this is how account is related to the user. And also we have a verification token. We can just go ahead and copy this from here. And I'm in the schema right now. So we have user twice. Only thing we need to keep here is the posts relationship is as itself. And what else? We have email, image, etc. So now we can remove this. And if there's anything else, references, ID. So yes, in here we have user reference ID saved as using author ID, but the type of author ID is integer. In here we have an ID that is string. We can modify that to keep the same as it was before. And here we were using auto increment. And I believe then we have to change this field as well. User ID integer. same thing as here. Oh, and then one thing that we have to add, this is specifically for GitHub authentication. For some reason, it also needs to track this field, which is refresh token expires in. So basically, when does the token expire? Let's make this optional and integer. And then if you have Prisma extension installed on the VS Code, you're going to also get formatting like this. Now let's save this and push these changes. So this will be npx prisma migrate. Oh, it has to, we have to indicate dev. Okay. Migrate dev. Well, that is updating to be able to use GitHub as an authentication method for our application. We also need to get API keys from GitHub itself, and that could be done. So if you go right now to your GitHub account and go to settings, from settings, you can select developer settings. And inside here, you're going to create a new GitHub app, give it a name. I'll show what I have. So give a GitHub name, description, so you can just identify which token, which app is this. For homepage URL, we don't need the repost. Localhost 3000, that's where our app is running, and it will be sending requests to. As for the callback URL, make sure you do localhost 3000, API, auth, and callback GitHub. This is what the NextAuth itself, when it signs into the user, this should send the callback to if it's successful. And yeah, that's about it. I don't have any of this selected, and you can go ahead, save changes and generate. So the key that will be generated, you're gonna copy that, and also you're gonna need client ID, and that would go inside .env file, which would be GitHub ID, and then the GitHub secret would be the key generated. And next, that I don't think it's required for the develop, but it is recommended to have, and I have it. So just in case it works the same, is NextAuth URL, which is going to be once again localhost 3000, the same link that we used for GitHub. And NextAuth secret is a secret that you generate yourself. And on their like documentation, NextAuth has that you can run this command inside your terminal, and whatever you get as a result, you can just copy and paste it in there. Just generate it online. Okay, so once we have that, let's go back to see how our migration is looking. Let's just give it a name, migration 1. Okay, and it seems to be now in sync with the schema. Also, don't worry about this environment variables. We're gonna add that one later on. So you only need to have including NextAuth secret. Okay, so we updated Prisma schema, and we also added the required environment variables. The next part is to actually create a route for NextAuth and configure that. And as a route example, here we have like a sample code, and it should be following like inside pages. I think that's a page router example. In our case, it would be inside app API, and then Auth. Let's say we don't have API folder yet, but we can create one. It would be new folder. We need 3 dots next. Auth, and then inside NextJS app router, the way we define API routes is using the name itself route. So let's do routes.TypeScript and paste this code. Instead of Google, we're gonna import GitHub provider. GitHub and providers GitHub. Let's copy that, paste that in. So client ID, client secret. This is underlined because we don't know at this point if process.env exists or not. Let's update also the names, but we should definitely make sure this is added and this is loading, which would, if you have an application running, you would have to restart it. And I'm gonna also do that. And let's do GitHub ID as a string, and then we have GitHub secret also as string. I'm gonna add a few more configurations for the session. We'll use strategy JWT. And yeah, we need to pass the secret. If you do have added that, it would be NextAuth. Secret is what we named it. Oh, I misspelled it. Okay. And then let's do debug true only for the local, where it will give us updates inside the terminal as the state changes. And in like the app router, we do a little bit differently than export default, just the NextAuth, because we have to define what kind of API it is. So let's do this. Let's define this constant handler that equals to NextAuth, and let's do export handler. So NextAuth, I think it does as a get, and then it also serves as a post. And yeah, that should be that. Let's save it. Now to actually test it out, we do need that sign in, sign up button. So let's create that button, and inside Auth, I'm going to create new, inside app, I'm going to create new folder Auth, and inside here, I'll do button.tsx. Okay, so we have a button, and because we need to have a use session hook from the NextAuth, so we would be using sign in function. Then we have a sign out function, and we need to check if the user is signed in or not. That's why we need the use session, but because this is a hook, we need to define this button component. Also the button, it has interactivity as a client component. And what we do here is we take constant data coming in, we rename it as session, and let's also get status, if it's loading or not, take it from use session. So if status equals loading, we can just return that that is loading. And if we do have a session, then we would return a button that would say sign out. And on click, let's define that as well. So for some reason, when I just tried their sign out function, it was reloading the page. So that's why I had to do event.prevent default. So that reload of the page doesn't happen, and then sign out kicks in from NextAuth. But if that's not the case, then let's do sign in, and then we will just do on click. That would equal to sign in. Save that, and we can import this into a header at home. Inside layout, header, So first let's do import button as auth. Then we have from auth. What is this? Export default. We don't need export. Let's just do. Okay. Now going back here, so we can't use session just yet until we wrap wherever we are using session, using the session provider, because that's what basically like passes down the session. The session provider is also coming from the NextAuth library. And for example, if we wanted to do this, because either way button would be inside. Okay. Here, and I'm going to replace this one with auth button. So it is inside the session provider. And because session provider serves as basically like a context for the session, we do have to, when we're using it, use it inside a client component. So I'm going to define this as use client. That's why I didn't wrap. You're going to see in a lot of places where people do take the session provider and wrap inside the main, like either it's an app.jsx or in our case like page.tsx, like the main file. But we want to still make use of certain components in different places, so we don't want to turn everything into a client component. And after we added the environment variables, we have to restart the server, so it reads that. And let's go in here. We see the sign in. If we click on it, we're going to go to sign in with GitHub, and let's do that. And now I'm logged in and it can recognize that I'm signed in, and I do get this sign out button, and we also get this like, and it's showing us like logs, logging like user session and all that information. Now let's just update the styling of this button. We can do the same styling as we had for the static one. Text white, background black, and some padding. I'm going to copy that and paste it also for the sign in. Next feature we're going to implement is creating a new blog functionality in which we're going to let users that are logged in click on from the menu, select new blog, and then enter information like the title, content, and etc. of the blog, submit and publish it. And this is kind of like the overall file structure and some of the functions and the names that we're going to use. What we already have right now is a blog folder that contains this ID, and then the page that gets this dynamic ID and based on finds it in the database and then loads that specific blog, right? And next up, we're going to create a new route. So it would be like /blog/new. And we create routes by creating folder, right? And inside this folder, we're going to create page.tsx, so that would contain this form. We need the form so that user can fill in all this blog information. But because we need to capture the fields, because form we would create a state to save that information as user puts in, right? So we would have to have this new blog form as a client component. We can disregard the categories for now because we don't have the categories we're going to implement later on. And because when we create a new blog record in the database, we need to also tell it which user created. We need to know which user is logged in, right? That's why we need to wrap this to pass the ID inside session provider to pass like session information. We can do that inside the layout. And one final thing is that submitting the blog requires interacting with the server. But because we have the form as a client component, we can't directly interact with the server inside client component. We can in the server component, but not in the client. So when we press submit, we do need to do that. That's why we can call server action. Think of server action as an action that runs on server. It's like a new feature of NextJs 13. And for actions, we can create like a separate folder and create give like an action name and then call that in here. So yeah, let's get into coding now. So let's go to next config.js and we need to enable it. So that would be inside here, experimental is the field, and we select server actions and set it to true. Let's save that, close this out, and I'm gonna close the rest out. So inside the blog, as I mentioned, we'll create a new folder. Let's name this name, and we're gonna have new file for the layout, also for the page, and the component for the form that we'll call that from the page itself. Let's create that, save it, and I can also create this, save this, and import new blog form in here. Oops. Let's add that session provider in the layout. So that would be, first we have to, similar to how we did for the header import, you make it use client, so like client component. Then we need a session provider from NextAuth, and we also need import session, as we don't directly have not from here. So we don't directly have a component that needs access to the session. It would be nested, so it would be new blog form. So we would like pass on session, and I'll show you guys how to do that. Export default function layout, and that would take in the children and the session, and this is, we're using TypeScript, right? So we have to define those types. Children would be of React node. Let's import, oh, we don't need to import React anymore, yeah. And then session would be either of type session, or it could also be null if the user is not logged in. Anyways, return. Now we're gonna return a session provider, and it will take in session as a props, and then we pass in children. We don't need this extra div right here. So children would be basically this page, or like if there's any other folders inside and more nested pages, that would go inside the children. And I think that's it for the layout. Let's save that, and let's create like a simple form for now inside our new blog form. So that would be form. Let's do input. Type would be text, name is title. Then for the other one, let's do text area for the content. Okay, and let's do a button that says type submit, and I'll update the right now to blog new. We should, oh no, this anymore, I guess. Oh, because there was a change found in nextconfig.js, I guess it started to restart, but it didn't go through. Let's reload this. There's this form because we're using Tailwind. It has like no styling, but if you focus it, it does have this blue outline, and then we have this button create, right? Now let's create the state that we are gonna store. Like if I type it in right now, it will show up, but we need to have access to those values. So let's create the state and import React. We're gonna do use state. And we also need use session, as I mentioned, for submit function later on. And let's give access to the session based on the hook. And what fields do we need? We need title, set title that equals to use state, and we're using TypeScript, so let's give it a type, and it would be an empty string by default. We also do need same thing for content, set content, and that would be it. So also we have to check if there's like no session. We display, they shouldn't end up on this page, but we should display it must be signed into post, or we can also redirect them to sign in. And now let's just update this value. So first, to make sure this value shows up, we pass in the title, and then we also pass in when user starts typing, we want this to get updated. So that would be on change. On change will take in an event, and it would set title to event.target.l value. And the next step would be kind of the same thing for the content, except we make that watch like a different state. And set content. And this one, actually we don't need to pass the button since it's type submit. If we pass a function to the form, when that button is clicked, then that would be triggered. And for that, we'll create a new function called handle submit. And let's do that here. So it will be an async form event with HTML form, as like it will take in this type, so that's correct. So this is where we can just directly import Prisma in here and run the mutations. We have to call the server function or server action, and let's create the server action. So app, new folder, actions, and this would be publish post. For the server action, we have to mark the beginning of file using this keyword, use server. And next, we import Prisma from the library definition that we gave it. We also want to have types generated from Prisma. So for that, we actually import that from client. Prisma client. Okay, so then export, we just create like an async function, nothing we haven't done before, I guess. It's just the format of creating use server and then putting in the actions, and we'll give this post info, and then the type of this would be Prisma that I'm going to use post unchecked create input and constant new post that equals to, so the function we're going to run would be prisma.post.create, and then we pass in, it takes in the data, and I want to destructure it in case we have another fields that we want to add, and in the end we want to return new post, and I think that should be it. Now let's go back to new blog form and import create post from, so that would be app actions publish post. That's weird sometimes. Oh, because I'm doing this. Okay. Great. So 2 reasons we want to return create post as it is created. First is just to verify that it has been created in the database. Second is to access the ID. So if we know the ID, then we can know the link, and then we can show them users like, oh, it's been published. Here's the link to go check it out. Right, and okay, so we are inside handle submit right now, and then first thing, we don't want page to reload, so prevent default. Then we need to get a user ID. So it's the tricky part because we do have a session information, but if we hover over what's coming in the session user, we only get name, email, and image back. For some reason, by default, NextAuth doesn't send the ID, but we do need that Prisma ID so that Prisma is able to look up user with that ID and create a relationship that the blog is written by the user. But fortunately, we can't modify the route of the NextAuth so that it actually returns the ID back to us. And that could be done by using this like modifying callbacks function. So what we do is there's like 2 parts since we're using JWT tokens as a callback. So it's taking in a token and the user, and by default it just like returns this token. But we also want access to the user. So let's first check if user does have an ID. Then we say token that we set the token.id to user ID. So when this token comes back, it comes with the ID. And then we pass that on to the session. And in here, we also have session token. So we check if session has a user. We want to update that user. So session that user equals to token ID. And then finally, we return session. Let's modify this. Oh, it should be inside the callbacks actually. And okay. I have to rerun the app again, so when it catches, re-log into the app again, so when it catches the session, then it adds the user ID into it. But yeah, anyway, so now we should have access to this. Let's just do question mark, and so if we don't have user ID, let's just return it. But if we do, we create a post, which would be await create post. We pass in title, content, but so user ID inside Prisma, we are using author ID field. So that's what we should pass it on following the Prisma types, because if we hover over this, we'll get like what kind of types it is expecting. And finally, let's create a state to determine if it is submitted or set submitted. By default, that's going to be false. And if this goes through, so let's do try and then catch if there's any errors, and we want to console log the error. And I'm gonna move this title of try, so set submitted, we set that to true. And use state, oh yeah, I have to, forgot to mark this as use client. Okay, I'm gonna sign out, sign in again. Let's update also the button has cursor, set it to cursor pointer. So right now it has the same one as of the text. Okay. Closing this out, let's sign in. And we can also have this, well, if submitted, return post been submitted. Later on, we can update that. So let's create, here's this title, content, create, and post submitted. Great. We can also check inside Prisma to make sure it's there. So we can run Prisma Studio by npx Prisma Studio command. So it should start Studio on this localhost 555, and we do have this one post that I just submitted showing up here. But if we want to see other models, we can add this tab, select the model, and browse it. So now I'm gonna go back to this form right here, and we can make some styling changes. So I'm gonna reload this. First, let's look at the form. So I'm gonna make this stretch actually the full height of the screen. So minimum height, and then calc, let's do 100. View height is like the view height of the view available, but I'm gonna minus the height of the header, so 130 pixels, or maybe like a little bit more. I'm gonna add some padding. We also put this inside container, and let's make it flex direction column, and margin at the top. So now it should stretch out the full height. And for the form, we're gonna also make this flex, so that one also follows the height of the container. So actually we can do on the input elements items stretch, and we'll take the content to have the biggest space in here. Justify center, then we have height full and text. And for the title, I'll make the text bigger. And what else do we want? I don't want this focus outside, so focus visible, outline none. And let's add a placeholder, that would be content. Oh, not the content, this is the title. Here we have, and let's move on to the content. I want this to stretch the full width, so we'll set it to flex 1. Now we're gonna have this create button move all the way. Oh, it's not moving down. Okay. We're gonna take a look at that. Also, same thing for this. Let's set text to for Excel, and I'm submerging at the top. And for the button with feed content, text, let's do white, and background I'm gonna do indigo 500 or 4. Add some padding. And on smaller, larger screens from the smaller breakpoint, let's add a bigger padding, some margin at the top. Let's do border 2 rounded corners, and then shadow we'll do same that we have in hero section. I should also maybe define this shadow as a default in the Tailwind configuration, so I don't have to do this anymore. Okay. Oh, I know what's going on. We have to set flex 1 to this one as well, so and I'm missing a dash here, so okay. We should also get status here and check, because if it's the status is loading, then we don't want to say their actual log pane. We don't want to say you must be signed in, so that does not equal to loading. So one of the reasons we didn't directly have this blog form functionalities inside of this page.tsx defining that was we wanted to keep page.tsx as a server component, as it is supposed to be fetching the list of categories. So we pass that categories as a drop down. User can select if they want to select the category for which like the blog belongs to. And yes, so there'll be that, and we'll first create that inside Prisma. Like it would be a new model, also a field on the post, and it's going to be model category, and we're gonna do ID integer. That would be the unique identifier. Let's do that, and then by default it's going to be set to auto increment. Then I'm going to do just name string, and for the post, one category can have multiple posts. I'm going to add that in, and let's add the relationship here as well, where we say this could belong to also multiple categories. So this is going to be an array. Let's save this, go in here and do npx prisma migrate dev. And before we add categories to the form, let's take a look at the blog page itself. So we have one blog here, and this is just we basically dump the data, and let's update the styling, and we can also add more data in there. So right now what we have access to is post that contains title, content, published, and author ID. So for example, if you wanted to display a author information, name, or like image with the ID, we can't tell much of that, and we don't want to make another query to fetch the author. So what we can do is just a little bit modify this find unique query, in which after the where statement we add another statement that is include, and we pass in author and set that to true. So what this will do is it would basically just include the author model inside this post and get that information. So we can save this now. And if we, I guess, we could do that somewhere after the post. Maybe after title would be a good choice. And we do by post after that name. And we get the name here. We can also, let's add the image. So I'm going to import image from NextJs image, and let's do, so actually we don't need to create the image, we can just create the div and use that as a background image instead. So this would be class name equals to, let's set width to 5, height to 5, also rounded full, so it would be like a circle like GitHub has usually. And so background contain, and we also have to do like style, pass it background image URL, that would be post dot author dot image. Oh, why is that so many times showing up? I don't think yeah, interesting. Let's also make the main container, set it as a container, and margin top do 6, modify header text 5 XL, margin bottom 5, and that should be it. So for container, we should have that centered, but similar to how I guess Medium has that, like in this case the width of the container would be like this, and it's usually not that I guess spread out, it's a little bit smaller. So what we can do is we can create another class for like smaller containers and add some styling to it. So if we go to globals.css, how we can do that is by adding a layer, and then we say components, and we add a new one, container. I'm gonna name this small, and then we apply the classes we want it to always have. So for example, max width, I'm gonna always do like medium, this would be centered, and then on the small one, let's do max width, maybe excess, save it, and let's copy, close this out, replace it, so it is, yeah, way smaller in width right now. And I'm going to put inside here another div. We're gonna make this flex, and items would be center, and this would go after this one. Okay, and then let's separate this to come after the image. So it would be like this, and we're gonna add some like margins in between and update the color of the text. So let's get started with that one. Also the text font size, text gray 500. And same for the other p tag that we have, which is the author. And let's move this out of this div. We want this to be on like a separate row. So save, and yeah, this needs a margin at the top 4. Okay. Left is going to be a little bit bigger than the right because we should have like a space there. For uploading images, we are going to use upload thing. Let's go ahead, create a new app, give app the name, and then as for the URL, it's optional. Once we create the app, we can go over the documentation. So basically how it works is that we need storage, file storage for like uploading files, right? And it creates an S3 bucket for us, and then it handles, we can just save the URL. So and it comes with the module. So let's copy the command to install the module. And once we have that, we're gonna head over to the terminal of our application, and over there we're going to install it. And once the module is installed, then we need to add environment variable with the name that it is indicated in the docs. So in .env, I'm gonna paste the name. As for the value itself, we can fetch that in the dashboard of our application, and then we select the application that we just created and go ahead to the API keys. And I'm gonna copy these values from here directly and then paste it in that env file. And once you do that step, let's look at what's next. I'm gonna jump into a broader code documentation, and here first we have to create this inside an API folder, and what we'll do is basically create an API route for upload things, so maybe from UI when it calls, it's able to call from there. And let's do that. In API we have a new folder, we're going to name it upload thing, and then new file that would be core TypeScript. It looks like in here they just have like a function itself, and that like takes in the file and then uploads it to their server. And then using the route TS is how we actually create routes in NextJS, right? So let's go ahead, create a new file, and inside here basically we import it and create a route to call the function. And the third one is the example of how the component is used itself, and we can also follow the same inside the app. I don't think we have any utils folder for now, so yeah, let's go ahead, create a new folder, and inside here we can just whenever we need image upload, reuse this component. And I'm going to create a new file here, upload thing, pasted. One thing that doesn't match their code is doesn't find API like that, so we just have to go back and yeah, fetch it that way. Let's save this, and would be just an example of how we use this in our application is we import that and the styles and just pass in props. Okay, and now let's go to blog, new, and then new blog form. We can paste our upload thing in here. So we're gonna keep, we already have use client, we're gonna keep import for styles file. And as for this one, I don't think it picks up utils. Okay, so we can just do like this. All right, and we don't component, functional component, also going to remove the main as well as the other parts of, basically I can just copy this, and we are going to put this maybe after the input. Input and then the text area. Go to our form. Now we're going to see this button to choose file, and then we can select file. If we press open, it's going to load it into here. And the next step, and throws the alert, we're going to remove the alert, but just to test that it's working. And also before you go to the form, you have to rerun application once again because of environment variable, the new one that we added. And so that's working, and we want to now actually save when this gets uploaded and we get the URL to save the application. So let's do that, and let's further inspect what is going on here. Here is where we get on client upload complete, and we have an alert. Let's remove the alert, and we have console log files, and then in the result we can inspect upload file response and see how we can get URL. And I'm going to create also another state for saving this, so once we submit we have access to that, and it will be thumbnail, it will be string, or we can, I think if nothing is uploaded by default, upload thing would return null. So we are going to have that, and we will update this. Going in here, and it will be result returns not files but 0 the URL. Result is possibly undefined. Okay, let's check if there's a result. Oh, if result. All right, and we can also add some styling to it. So let's do self, oh, not the caps lock. So I'm just wrapping it into a div, adding a self start class so it's aligned to the left. And below that, this is a form, so I'm gonna add a label. The label styling would be class name, text slate 600, some margin at the bottom, and it'll say add thumbnail, let's image, and also indicate that this is optional. And one more thing is that once we are sending a request to create post, we should also indicate image URL, but we currently do not have, I just realized in the schema Prisma a field for that, so let's go ahead and edit image URL, and this currently be viewing string GraphQL. Oh, okay, just all right, and then this will be also optional. I think that would save that. Let's run npx prisma migrate dev. I am going to name the migration 3, and that should generate the client. So now we should be able to say like image URL that would equal to thumbnail. And these borders are overlapping because on smaller screen the width are bigger than the actual like 3 times that. So let's do by default with full, because on smaller screens it's going to be 1 column, and then on larger screens than that, starting from small breakpoint, we can do with 40. Then on medium, let's do 60, and for the larger screens we're going to leave 80, and I'm going to save changes. Oh, it still seems to be overlapping. I'm gonna maybe update the values. Let's set the smaller values to see if it's actually getting updated. And I'm gonna inspect it, and I think the width is still set to 80, so the breakpoints that we added don't seem to be coming in the HTML here. Yeah, I don't see it. I'm gonna refresh it, see if that changes anything. So okay, now the widths are smaller, so that, yeah, that got updated. And I think it is too small. Maybe we can start the 3 columns from like the medium breakpoint, and then also, let's see, update this values back. It's too small right now, so I'm gonna set width to 40, and then this one back to 60. Okay, that looks better. Now let's start adding content into it. So I'm going to wrap this inside the link article, because we are sharing a link towards the article. The width and height, I'm going to set it, both of them, to full. And next we'll have a figure. Inside the figure we can also add a class name. This would be for the image. So the width, I'll set it to full, but as for height, let's do like 72, and let's add also breakpoints for smaller screens. So starting off with 20 by default, then on medium screen size we can do 30, and leave the height 72 for larger screens. I'm also going to add a border only on the bottom side, so that when the text starts we have that border in between the image and the text. And let's add image here, and I added this image in the public folder, and if you guys want the same exact image, you can download from the GitHub of the repository. And going back here, so this would be the default image if, for example, an article doesn't have an image. This will show up, but if not, we'll just display the article one. So let's first check post.image URL, does it exist? Then display image, source would be post URL, and then if not, also image, but with a different URL. And let's add a source right now. Post that image URL. We also need to add alt text, which would be thumbnail, and for the class name we'll just set width to full and heights to full as well, so it will just take up the space for figure. For the object background, it would be cover. And let's copy the same fields for this, and see, we get this source as a red because it knows that we checked that this image URL is undefined. So let's just type it in the path and the name to our added image. And let's see, so those are our images, and it looks nice on the larger screen. I think on smaller screen the width is too small, so let's just modify that. I'm gonna do, the height, so 40 for medium and then 30 by default, and that looks better. Now we can move on to adding the other parts below the image, like more information about the article. So let's start off with creating a new div. I'm gonna add classes here like padding, For y, it would be a y-axis, it would be a little smaller, so let's do 5. For text, we're gonna left align the text. Height, we'll set this to full, and inside here we can add first, so we already have a title, so I'm just gonna copy this, and on the first line we are going to have a title. Actually, this one we can change it to the header instead. So let's do h1, same ending tag, and then we'll do paragraph for the content itself, post.content, and some classes for this one, so they show up on the right side. You can see on that one card. We're gonna do text size, font size 32, some margin at the bottom, and yeah, I think that's it for the header. And for the content, smaller font size, also margin bottom. And then if the content is large, obviously we don't want the whole content to be shown on the card, so we're going to do line clamp, which basically takes max and the number 4, so it show max 4 lines. And below that, we're gonna say read more, and then if they click that, the card regardless would get redirected to the article page. And for this to like pop, I'm gonna add text color indigo 600, and yeah, that kind of matches with our style. And then if we hover over, we get this shadow effect. So another thing that we might want to add is the date of when the article was posted, and for that we need to access post.created@at field. But if we hover over post right now, we're going to see that we don't have this created at field. But if we go to schema, Prisma has the capability of like storing created at, updated at, those kind of fields, but we just need to add it to the model. So let's go to the type definitions of post, and inside here add created at. The type would be datetime, and by default it would be now. So if you push this right now, all the blocks would have created at set to now, but in the future on, it would be the accurate date. So whenever you're going to create the post, then it would set that to that date. And let's push the changes, npx prisma migrate dev, and then it'll ask me in a bit to name the migration. So once that comes in, then this error should go away. And because created at is date time, we can just directly use it in HTML. We have to convert it into a string, so we're going to use this function called toLocalString. So it basically takes in datetime timestamp and makes it into a more human readable form as well. So it would be better to display that. And yeah, for now it's showing me that it's empty, but once the client side Prisma client is generated, then that error should go away. And below in my terminal, I'm gonna name the migration. So we're just gonna wait for that, and let's add a class name. So the text size, let's do base, also add margin bottom. And we have an error. Oh, I have a typo here inside the, instead of strong, it's supposed to be string. So let's fix that. Okay, and save that. And now let's move on to the category selector, display our categories and turn them into a filters. So first thing that we can do is copy. So we want to have categories of different colors. So we have the some color list in the post where we did that for home screen. So let's go ahead, copy that, and I'm pasted here in category selector. And next thing we're gonna do, let's just remove this text and take in the props categories that we're getting and just map them out. So let's accept the suggestion, see how it looks like. Yep, it's not bad. I'm just gonna change few things here. So inside the class name, like the styling, so I'll change this to rounded full, so we have like more circles, a little bit bigger text. Set it to Excel. Gonna remove this small text, and also the container itself, I'm going to make it a flags, justify center, and add flags wrap. Yep, that looks better. And before, we're going to need more props for this to determine which category is selected. But before we jump into that, we would have to go to parent container. Let's just turn the div of the category itself into the button, and later on we're going to add a prop on click from the props. We only get categories here, right? So that's our props. Let's open the all post container, and in here let's keep track of which category is selected. So I'm going to add useState, import useState hook at the top, and inside the all post we will save ID of the selected category, and that's our hook. So useState, let's give it a type. This is going to be a number, or it could be null if nothing is selected, and by default let's set it to null. Now we can create a function that updates this category ID, and we're going to pass that function into our component. So name it handle category click, takes in the ID, updates our current state, and this too, let's pass it on into the props. So I'm just gonna copy the names, and for the props names I'm also going to give them the same names. Select category function for would be handle category click. Yeah, it's red now because we have to also update the prop type of category selector. So I'm gonna open this to the side, and so let's see. Category selector props, this type is already used by all posts here. So if we change that, then all posts would require to also, as a props when it's getting categories, to also get those. But what we can do is that we can still keep category select props. We can create a new type that combines that one and also additional props that we are requiring right now. So that would be by creating new type. So we give new type a name, category selector props with state, let's say, and we take the existing props and we end it with this new type that we're creating right now inside the bracket. So select category, that will take in ID as a number, and return type of that function would be void. Next up we have this ID, and let's close it out. Let's take this props and replace our component props with type with that new type. And so now this is red is gone because we're passing the correct types. We can save these changes, and in here we can have different styling for the selected category to like visually identify which category is selected. We can add just like a shadow. So I'm going to create another condition in here, and that would determine props that selected category coming from. If it's same as this current ID, then we add the class name neo shadow, and if not, just empty string. Let's save that. And also on the button we have to add this on click, so it actually updates the state. And let's call this callback function by passing in the ID of our category. And yeah, let's save that. And if we go back to our application, oh, we get an error for using useState without determining, I think, the client component. Even though I marked all posts as a client component in the diagram, I still forgot to do that. And yeah, let's go up here and say use client. Let's save that, and going back now, if we click, we see that the shadow is getting updated and the category is getting selected. Now next thing we have to do is actually filter out the posts so that the ones that we have that category actually show up. And for that, we're going to go to the all posts, since that is the UI component that's going to control that. So in here, I'm going to create a new variable that's going to contain this list of filtered posts. So what we're going to check here is first, is there any filter set? If there is set, let's filter out. So this looks, I think, suggestion that correct. Except one thing that I'm going to change is if post categories, since we just have one, so find, and then if there's no category set, just return props.posts, and instead of that, I'll take this filter post and pass it to our post list component, so the list shows exactly that. And we don't have any in Web3 or AI, but for, AI is showing up, the one that's the ChatGPT one. And we can also add a little button so that this filter is getting reset. And let's do that below all this list of categories. So just go for key, because we already have a few buttons here. Let's pass it in a unique key. I'll say remove selection. And same thing for the label, remove selection. And this will be conditional, so if nothing is selected, we don't really need to display that. And checking if ID exists. If not, then null. And on button, on click, we're going to once again use select category. It's just the category that we're going to set to would be null. So whatever it was by default with no selections. And only thing is that this function right here is expecting a number. So we can change the type of the function. So it's either number or it could be null. And I think we have to change it one more time inside all posts. Yep, here, handle category click, null, and okay, so now if we click remove selection, it removes the selection and brings us back all the posts. Let's just update the styling so it shows up below this categories, and also for the class name itself, let's do cursor pointer since it's a button, and then text underline. So, I think it's not text underline, just underline maybe. Okay, and let's set the parent container to flex column, so this remove selection shows up on a different column, and then the categories itself, I'm going to wrap them into another flex container. And let's save that. Oh yeah, justify center. I'm going to copy that over, and actually I do need the flex wrap as well. Okay, let's remove selection, and yeah, those are our blog posts. Now let's go back to the home page, and we have this button, browse all articles. Let's link that over to the page that we just created. So that would be hero section. And where's our button? Okay, so instead of button, I'm gonna just turn this into a link. So let's import that. Let's change that and add an href blog all. And if we click that, we're back to this page. For the email newsletter service itself, we're going to use Beehive. You just need to create an account, and we don't need to install any additional packages. We can just call their API, and inside the app.beehive.com, I'm going to go to integrations, and here we're going to use API version 2, and I'll copy my publication ID and also press API keys and generate new API key. Once you have that, and here's the documentation, let's go back to .env file, and inside here, let's add, we're gonna call it Beehive API key, and paste the key that just got generated. And once that is pasted, let's go back to documentation. So here we can see the URLs, API URLs that we can use for production, and for the mock server, we're also going to go ahead, copy this and use it in our application. And we also need the publication ID, so I'm going to copy that one and add here, and also name it Beehive publication ID. Let's add another section below the trending on our home page, and I'll name this component callout section. And inside the public folder, I also added this avatar that I'm going to use on the right side of the section, and then we're going to have some text on the left. So since we're using image, I'm going to import image from NextImage, and let's start with, we don't need the props, and I'm also removing it from here. Okay, so let's make this a grid, and actually before that we're gonna have the parent container, and then inside that we're gonna make grid. So let's do border at the top too, and let's do border also the bottom two, background indigo for 100, margin top 12, and padding would be 8. And then here we're going to have a grid. So total number of columns is going to be 12, and we define the grid container. And then on the left side, we're going to have the container that's going to contain some text, and we'll make this one take up more space, and call span would be 8. Also, let's make it flex direction column, and then place self-center on the grid. Adding a header, let's do something like stay up. Let's do this one, stay in the know, followed by a further description that I'm just gonna paste that in as for the class name. So this one is going to be semi-bold text for Excel, margin bottom 5, and this one, let's set a max width, which would be 2 Excel. And on the other side, so we have this first one, let's do the second one. This would be class name expand up to 4, rounded, full border 2, and then so the width and the height I'm going to set the same as I want for the image. So I want the image to have the outline, and let's make this one relative, also self-center, and the image would have the position of absolute, and source is avatar.png. What else we have here? Alt text is avatar as well. So let's do width and heights, otherwise it's like required. And rounded full, actually we don't, it's already a circular image, so we don't need this. Just position, absolute, transform, translate to like center it. And so minus 50% is what I'm doing right here, and translate Y on the left side and top as well. Okay, callout section. I'm gonna take this and put it in our homepage. Okay. Let's see. Great. And then I'm gonna make it smaller for smaller screen so it doesn't play over. And also let's make this expand, because this one has a background, make this expand full width. And then I'm gonna remove the container from this like main element from the layout. So let's do this thing. Class name container. And let's instead wrap this 2 into it. Okay, so here we have hero section and the posts. And going back to the callout section, so we can do this by default, and then height. But then the image size. Okay, so image size kind of fits in there. That's great. Let's also add line clamps on this. Oh, we already have that. We don't. On this postcards, in case also the post is large. So let's do line clamp, maybe 7. Should be fine. Next, we'll have also like a email part here for a newsletter, subscribe, and then the button where users can put in the email and subscribe. And let's create a component for that we're gonna put in inside callout section. So new file, newsletter subscribe.tsx. And this is going to be a form. We're going to make this a client component. And we're also going to import the state, as we need to save the state of if the user is subscribed, then we're going to display just like the text message. Subscribe, set subscribed, and use state Boolean false. So if subscribed, let's return a text, and so I'll actually do, this would be h2, should have wrapped this, and just adding a class name text to Excel, some description, and the display of this column. Text would be white since the background is indigo, and this is going to be a form. Let's do input. Okay, so the type equals email. Placeholder, let's make it enter your email since the length would be a longer one, and the class name we want border 2. Okay, rounded we're gonna do only on one side since on the other side we're gonna have buttons. So rounded full, and then R on the right, none. What else? Some padding. Four, and flex would be 1, so it would take up the whole space. Actually, let's go ahead, import this, and see how these changes are happening. I'm going to put this below our, oops, not this, newsletter subscribe. Okay, so this is what we have now, and after the input, we are adding a button that says subscribe. So we're gonna make also a button rounded, but before we get to that, so this one has flex 1. We have some padding. Let's do background color update a little bit. 900. Oh. $200, text gray 800. So outline none, and then we can also update the color of placeholder, gray 500, and on focus the background would become a little bit lighter. So for the button, we're gonna have rounded, but on the other side, corners. Same padding, I think should be fine. And then background gray. 900. The text on the other way would be 100. So we have a contrast. Font semi-bold. And uppercase on hover, background gray. Oh, we already have. Okay, 700. That should be. Oh, and the border, let's also set to 2, otherwise it looks like we have some space in here. As for the text, though, I didn't change it to 100. Okay. Great. Background gray. Oh, we did have 800. Now let's create a new API route using which we're gonna call this Beehive API. So for that, I'm gonna create a new folder, and in here, let's do new route.ts, and this would be a post request. We're gonna send it a body and async function. So no, it's not true. Post, and then we say request is of type request from like Next.js is coming. And as you recall, we saw that there were like two URLs, one for production, one for mock server. So that's what we are gonna do. We're gonna use, depending on which environment we're on. So in production, we're gonna use production one, right? And then at the other one. So first, to check which environment we're on, we can access that using process.env node env. So if that equals to production, that's not correct. So I'm gonna paste in the values. So this is the production URL, and the other one is the mock URL. So for now, you would just use this one. And then we're gonna fetch, not fetch, just like get API key from our environment variables file, that is, and we named it Beehive API key. Make sure the spelling matches exactly as you have in your .env. So yeah, I have one I used, so I'm gonna do that. And so yeah, we do have those. If API key doesn't exist, we're gonna send in response that we need to set the API key. Okay, and next up, we're gonna get an email from the body that's been passed to the request, and in Next.js, especially the new version, this is how we do that. And okay, it's giving me an error, confusing because I didn't have the curly brackets, but then if email is not set, we respond to email not set. If that, then we are good to go ahead with the request. We're gonna make a request using a fetch API, and in here we pass this Beehive URL, and then URL endpoint that we're gonna be hitting is publications, followed by our publication ID. So this is also process.env.beehive. I wish you could, I think there's like browse what's available in here to make sure that, because there have been times when my spelling variables haven't been wrong, and I was like, oh, why didn't this environment variables loading? So yeah, maybe I'll try to look up something like that. And then subscriptions. So we want, they have different kinds of APIs that do like unsubscribe, different functionalities. We want subscribing. And then we paste in some stuff in here. So first one would be the method that is post. I do not want to accept the suggestion. I don't want to make any issues. And content type would be application JSON, and accept also application JSON. So then authorization is how we pass our API key. So this would be bearer, and then it would take in API key. And finally, we do also pass, as per their documentation, email object, which is in the body, and we JSON stringify it because we can't directly send the JSON, and constant res, and we get data back. So constant data equals await result JSON. And let's send that back. Return
response data and status. We can do 200 body type. Oh, because I didn't say response.json. Okay. Return new. Okay. And let's create a function in this subscribe form that calls this API. Async function create, we are going to take in form data, and it is of type form data. Let's first get the email field from the form data. So the way we access form data is form data.get email, and then await make a fetch request to the API on our application. So that would be API beehive. Method would be post. Body, we need to pass JSON stringify email. Headers, content type application JSON. And let's do this before we close that out. Let's get the result and convert it into the JSON. And then so the data, we status 200. Also, let's just try to console log data, and finally catch error on console log if there's any errors. Now create, we need to pass it to our form, and we can pass it via action equals to create. Only thing we need to make sure is the name that we have defined here matches what we are getting here. And we have to rerun the server because of the environment variable changes. Test it out, put in email, subscribe. We can inspect the data that we got back. That means that we had hit Beehive API successfully. And then we have status validating because the user also has to approve from their email. But I guess we can just to be on the status, it's going to be on the result, but we can see if the data came back, then means it was successful. So if we subscribe, thank you, we get this thank you message for subscribing. Okay, so I added these two icons in the format of SVG in the public folder that we're going to use as the social icons in the footer, and I got them from Icons8 website. I'm also going to link that website down below. And as for the footer, we're going to go ahead and create that inside layout because it's going to be reusable and it will be part of the layout. Footer, new component. I'm gonna move this out, and I'll import the path to this two icons that I mentioned. I picked one for GitHub, and the way we import SVG is kind of similar that we would import like an icon. It would be just inside. I think there's one more. So we give it a name and then we indicate the path for the icon. And next to actually display the SVG, we need a image from NextImage, and also we're gonna add a link to, because this icons would be as links. Now before we move on, we can import footer inside our layout file so that it shows up and we start making changes to it. And that would go below our main. Okay, let's if we reload this. Yeah, it shows up like the text here. Okay, first I'm gonna change the background color, make it darker, and the text would be white. We'll have some large paddings on y-axis and then for the other one. And let's create like 2 columns, and for that I'm gonna use flags and spread them out in between. So class name would be flags and containers so that it doesn't spread full width, as well as justify between. Then we start building out the first one. This would be kind of like a logo, information, copyright, etc. And flex direction, I'll do row and item center. Let's close this div out, and in here you can add your logo. I'm just gonna type out the text, and for the class name, 2XL, font size, and some margin in the bottom. And then let's make a little bit like description here. So copyright sign 2023, and this text we can do smaller. And there it is. Then we skip over to this div, create another div for the social classes, and let's make it social icons. Let's make it, wrap that in a link for the href. This would be link to the GitHub, and inside here let's do image. Okay, so source would be GitHub icon, and then we have I'll do 32 for this, and alt text. Okay, I think that should be, oh, it can't resolve. Okay, I think the path could be wrong. Oh, the name is wrong, not the path. So I named it GitHub icon, and then same for Twitter. And we do the same for Twitter. Okay, let's see if they're showing up. Great, I'm gonna add a margin in here. So there's some space in between the two. And so it should be justified between. So we have, oh, this is all in same. So this is the first container, this is the second container, so that's why the justify between was not being applied, but now it is. So these are the links, and oh, for the href, because if we hover over here, we're gonna see that it links to the inside our page, because link is used for linking inside the Next.js pages. So we should instead be using a tag. And if you want this to open in a new tab, we can add target blank. And if we do that now, because it starts with this and it doesn't have HTTPS, I think when Next.js reads it, it doesn't recognize it as an external link. So if we change that and we go now to here, then we get redirected to GitHub and opens in a new tab. Great.
Before we deploy this, I'll make a few changes to the hero section, mostly add some text in here, like description below tag, like the header. And yeah, let's go. And then if you're happy with the looks, you can skip this part, but let's do hero section. So just adding a description of what this blog is supposed to be about, and then some bullet points to like further describe the features, and I'll put them in a span. Adding some class name, and I'm gonna copy this, add 2 more. Product launches, and let's do see how it looks like. Fix this overlap of the link. We can make this a block, and then the width so that it doesn't full to fit. Okay, and then let's see if we, how would it look like if we change the color to the section. So if I do wrap this section into okay, and background. Okay, and then let's also take this one out of the container so it spreads the full width. So we can add the container on the grid itself, and on the layout on the page. It's not part of the layout. Let's do this one, and it needs now a padding. It has margin. Okay, let's turn this into a padding. Maybe at the top and larger on the bottom. Okay, great. And let's fix this space in here. Oh no, it's an auth button. So we have, oh, I think this has to be also flags. Okay. And items center. Stretch. Okay, so this one's stretch and then this one is centered. check if there's any build issues before we get this app on Vercel, we can run npm run build, and I did find one issue, and the good thing is that it tells us the line of where the issue is coming from. I had it in newsletter subscribe, and where I think I guess have a apostrophe somewhere, and I did not use this instead, and it should be on line 27. Thank you for okay. Not this fun has an invalid default export. I wonder if it's complaining about the session type. Trying to see if it's complaining, if it's a TypeScript error or it's ID when we updated the next configuration. I mean from here. So So I'm gonna do session with ID equals session and describe using as any, and afterwards we can check this one. That should stop throwing the error. And same thing when we're checking the ID. Okay, that seems to be no more errors. We are using Vercel, and you need the code to be uploaded into a GitHub repository, as you can just directly connect the GitHub and it will Vercel would be able to take your code from there. So once it selects the code, you should have the code deployed to the main branch, and after deployment you can configure the main branch. And for the Prisma, we can either override this build command inside the Vercel and say npm run build and Prisma generate, or we can add this script in package.json, which is what I'm going to do now. And so scripts post install. And in here, you should also, before we hit the deploy, add environment variables, so that go back to .env and start like copying and pasting. So on the key side, we would have the name of the variable, and then we would paste the value and put it in here one by one, all of them. And for the one variable, so for database URL that's hosted on the railway, we're good with that. For the GitHub ID, we would have to, after deployment, we would have to change it. because as you recall on the GitHub we configured the URL to be localhost, but then this time we have to create a new app and configure it to be the URL of this one. So I'm just gonna add this variables deploy and then show how to update that. One final thing after the deployment, when you see the status is ready or whenever you get like the domain for production development, you have to go back to GitHub and either create a new GitHub app that would redirect to this domain, and then you'd have to update the environment variables in here for GitHub with the new environment variables, or using keys on the local, you can go back to the app that you created and update this localhost URLs with this new domain that you received from NextJs. And once you save this, then GitHub authentication on your production would be working and your app would be up and running. Quickly recap what we did. We built out a landing page for our blog that contains as a header that's part of reusable layout. We have a link to navigate to creating a new post and also authentication in which we can log in using GitHub, and we also get this section of trending blogs. We integrated a newsletter using Beehive and added these footers. We also can browse articles, all of them, and also filter them based on the topics and remove the selection. We get this form that starts with a title, then we can add the content, choose a thumbnail image category, and publish the post. And finally, we deployed all these changes to Vercel. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and don't forget to link your blogs in the comment section, or you can also jump on our Discord server and share them, get feedback from others. And I have more exciting tutorials coming up, so make sure to like, subscribe, and keep an eye on them. I'll see you in the next one.